What I'm going to be discussing in this video is a truly fascinating filmmaking case study, one that's interesting regardless of whether you're a Star Wars fan or couldn't care less about it.
What did you say?
On one side you have Han Solo and Princess Leia, arguably the most iconic romantic pairing in cinematic history, and for all the right reasons. Their chemistry, their banter, their emotional beats, everything about their relationship just works.
I mean, this whole thing, it just works.
Then on the other hand you have Anakin and Padme. Their love story is infamous and notorious for being so awkward and so forced, and at times so cringe-worthy that it makes audiences wince just thinking about it. It's the kind of cinematic romance that lives on, but not for its passion, but for the memes. But what makes this comparison so compelling is that it's not just a matter of bad luck or miscasting. In fact, it's one of those rare moments in cinema where most of the variables are the same. Obviously, Han Solo and Princess Leia were brought to life by the legendary Harrison Ford and the late Carrie Fisher, but it's not like Anakin and Padme were played by amateurs. Hayden Christensen has delivered fantastic work in films like Shattered Glass, and Natalie Portman won the Academy Award for Best Actress in the movie Black Swan. These are proper actors with proper talent. However, the main similarity in this situation is that The Empire Strikes Back and Attack of the Clones were written by the same person. George Lucas was responsible for writing both romances. On one hand, he wrote one of the most beloved love stories in pop culture history, and on the other, he's responsible for what many consider to be one of the most unbearable. So, all of this really begs the question, what happened?
That's a good question.
Let's be absolutely clear, George Lucas is a visionary. He redefined blockbuster filmmaking, pioneered VFX, and built a galaxy that people are still exploring decades later. But if we are being honest, for the purposes of this video we have to acknowledge his well-documented Achilles heel, which is writing and directing human emotions, particularly romantic ones. On paper, Anakin and Padme's romance should work. It's forbidden love, a Jedi and a senator torn between duty and desire. It's tragic, and to some extent it's even Shakespearean. Well, it is in principle, but in reality it's more like Lilo and Stitch.
Annie?
How?
Wow.
Now, I can't do this video without bringing up this piece of dialogue.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
This has become a meme for a reason. It's tonally bizarre, it's contextually irrelevant, and it completely fails to deepen our understanding of Anakin's emotional state. What should be a moment of vulnerability and connection becomes this almost bizarre therapy session. This isn't romantic, it's just weird. Another issue is the romance between Anakin and Padme doesn't feel like an evolving relationship. It feels more like a narrative box to tick. The script tells us that Anakin and Padme are falling in love, but it never shows us why.
Please don't look at me like that.
Why not?
It makes me feel uncomfortable.
The following day.
I truly, deeply love you.
How is that possible?
Now, not only did George Lucas write Attack of the Clones, but he also directed it, and so he actually ended up compounding his own writing issues. Great direction often involves coaxing emotional truth out of actors, especially in romantic scenes where subtlety matters. However, subtlety isn't exactly a word you would use to describe George Lucas.
The thought of not being with you, I can't breathe. My heart is beating, hoping that that kiss will not become a scar. You are in my very soul.
I can't watch anymore.
Now, George Lucas has a reputation for minimalistic directing.
George never talked. It was sort of, we felt he wanted us to hit our marks and magically accommodate our dialogue. And he lost his voice at one point, and we didn't know that for days. And we wanted to get him a little board where it said, faster and more intense. That was his main direction. He just wanted us to speed through it.
George is notorious for saying, after a take, do it again, faster, more intensity. He certainly said to me, it's terrific, Tony, can you do it again faster? But that's it, I didn't get more intensity. I don't think 3PO with more intensity would be bearable, do you?
We all had to fill in a lot of the blanks. It was more a matter of if we did something he didn't like, he'd tell us, rather than telling us, what to do.
Now, Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen are both capable of delivering incredible performances. Just watch Black Swan or Shattered Glass for proof of that. But they're given almost no help in Attack of the Clones. Emotional beats are rushed, dialogue is delivered like someone reading a set of IKEA instructions, and scenes are often set against green screens with very little physical texture to interact with or emotional stakes to ground the moment.
I think if you'd asked me after we finished episode 3, you know, when we shot it in 2003, if I would do it again, I would probably most definitely have said no. Just because the films were so difficult to make. We were working more and more on just blue screens, blue set stages, green stages.
The romantic tension between Anakin and Padme never had a chance to build. In classic romance storytelling, pacing is everything, but really the most important thing that you need is to have these little silences between the characters that allow the chemistry to bubble up naturally. But George Lucas structures Anakin and Padme's arc like a sprint. Here's a picnic, here's a kiss, here's a wedding, people get the idea, and that's true, the audience does get the idea that they're in love, but we don't feel it. John Williams even composed one of the most beautiful love themes you'll ever hear in your life. It's sweeping, it's romantic, it's just a shame that it ended up scoring two people flirting like they just discovered what human emotions are. And now all of this sets the stage for one of the most fascinating contrasts in cinematic storytelling. George Lucas, for all his creative genius in world building, struggled to translate emotional intimacy to the screen, even when he had capable actors and arguably the greatest cinematic composer that's ever walked this planet at his disposal. So what happens when a different director has the reins of a romantic storyline that is still written by George Lucas, but with a stronger grasp of human emotion and character nuance? That director is Irvin Kershner. He had a strong background in character-driven dramas, he had a history as a teacher, and a deep interest in psychology. Irvin Kershner brought exactly the kind of emotional intelligence George Lucas knew he needed for The Empire Strikes Back, which is why he was handpicked by George Lucas himself.
The first one was directed, you were directed by George Lucas. Now you're directed by Irvin Kershner.
Right.
What is the difference?
Kershner is much taller.
Irvin Kershner directed with intention. He understood that romance is less about what's said and more about what's felt. So he gave Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher the freedom to explore and let scenes breathe, something that wasn't George Lucas's strong suit.
I think George likes people, but he's a little impatient with the process of acting, of finding something, you know? And he thinks it's there. It's right there. I wrote it down, you know? Just do that. You know, sometimes you can't just do that and make it work.
Irvin Kershner used pauses, lingering glances, body language, all of those subtleties that sell the idea of love more so than any grand and over-the-top declaration of it. There were moments when Irvin Kershner allowed Harrison Ford to improvise, and from that freedom came one of the most iconic romantic lines in cinematic history.
I love you.
I know.
Han Solo is emotionally guarded, cocky, but not heartless. Princess Leia is proud, vulnerable, and fiercely independent. The moment is romantic precisely because it's not traditional. Compare that with Padme and Anakin, where every line feels stiff and overworked. There's a mechanical quality to their dialogue, as if it's trying too hard to sound poetic but ends up feeling hollow. It lacks the honesty that made Han and Leia's dynamic so compelling. Irvin Kershner knew how to use the camera to emphasize emotional beats. His shots are intimate medium close-ups that frame the faces and capture flickers of expression and show characters leaning in or pulling back. There's texture to every interaction. These characters move, they circle each other, they challenge each other, they test their emotional boundaries. Irvin Kershner's direction allows those physical dynamics to become part of the story. Ultimately, what we learn from this comparison is that the director is the emotional architect. They decide when to linger, when to cut, when to push actors, and when to let them breathe. George Lucas for Attack of the Clones was both the writer and the director, and the romance suffered under the weight of his unchecked instincts. Without a strong directorial eye to translate his broad stroke ideas into emotional truth, the Anakin and Padme romance was cringy and unconvincing. Meanwhile, Irvin Kershner proved that great directing isn't about controlling a scene, it's about shaping it with precision and empathy. By focusing on emotional authenticity, by trusting his actors and by understanding that romance lives in the unsaid. Irvin Kershner gave us one of cinema's most beloved romantic pairings. Like Han and Leia, Anakin and Padme had the potential for an iconic love story. They had strong characters, compelling arcs, played by really good actors, and the same imaginative world building to play in. But only one of the couples had a director who knew how to translate written words into emotional truth, and something that resonated with audiences. That's the power of direction. It doesn't just point the camera, it points the emotion. It guides the audience not just through what is happening, but to why it matters. And that's the blunt truth of it.